My stepmother grabbed my arm at the funeral and whispered, "You're getting nothing." She smiled when she said it, like she'd been waiting years to say those words to my face. The lawyer hadn't even opened the folder yet. I'm Maya. My father was Richard Holt. He built a $70 million real estate empire from scratch. 3 hotels, a commercial property portfolio, a private equity stake in a logistics company. He worked 7 days a week for 30 years to build it. And for the last 9 years, he shared it all with Sandra. Sandra was 41. My father was 67 when he married her. Nobody said anything out loud, but everyone thought the same thing. She moved into his house 6 months after my mother died. She redecorated every room within a year. My mother's photos disappeared from the hallways. Her garden got ripped out and replaced with a pool nobody used. I was 24 when Sandra arrived, old enough to know exactly what she was, young enough that nobody listened when I said it. My father loved her, or he thought he did. That's the part that used to keep me up at night. Sandra had a talent, not for business, not for anything practical. Her talent was making my father feel young again. She laughed at his jokes. She touched his arm in public. She called him Richie in a voice nobody else used, and she was strategic about it. Within 2 years, she'd isolated him from most of his old friends. "They only want your money, baby. I'm the only one who actually loves you." I heard her say that, verbatim, standing outside his study door. I told him. He looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Maya, don't. Just don't." That word hit me harder than anything, so I pulled back. I focused on my own life. I built my career. I visited every month, then every 2 months, then holidays. Each time I came back, she'd made another small change. He stopped calling me on my birthday. He missed my promotion celebration dinner. He didn't come to my engagement party. Every time I asked why, Sandra had an answer ready. "He's been so tired lately, you know how he gets." He didn't want to make a big deal out of it. He said you two talked and it was fine. We hadn't talked. When my father got sick, Sandra controlled the access. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came in January. By March, she'd reorganized his medical team, his schedule, and his visitors list. I had to call ahead. 3 days notice, minimum. Once I showed up unannounced and she met me at the door. "He's resting. I'm his daughter, and I'm his wife." She smiled. 3 days, Maya." She closed the door in my face. I stood on the porch of the house I grew up in. I stood there for 5 minutes because I didn't know what else to do. I drove home. I cried in my car in a Walmart parking lot for 40 minutes. He died on a Tuesday in October. I was in a meeting when the hospital called. Not Sandra, the hospital. She hadn't told them to call me. I found out from a nurse named Carol who found my number in an old contact form. God bless Carol. I drove 4 hours straight. By the time I got there, they were already taking him. Sandra was in the family waiting room with her sister Diane and 2 of her friends. Diane looked at me when I walked in. Then she looked at Sandra. Something passed between them, something smug. I sat down. Sandra said nothing to me for the entire time I was there. Not one word. I helped plan the funeral anyway. I did it because he was my father. She let me do it because it was work she didn't want to do herself. The funeral was at St. Michael's. My father had been married to my mother in that church. 300 people came. Old business partners, employees, neighbors, people who'd known him for decades. Sandra wore a black dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She played the grieving widow flawlessly, dabbing her eyes at the right moments, accepting condolences with a hand on the chest and a tremble in the lip. I watched people console her, and I felt sick. My Uncle Gerald pulled me aside near the flowers. "You doing okay, sweetheart? I'll survive." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Your father loved you. Whatever happened these last few years, he loved you." I nodded. I didn't trust my voice. After the service, Sandra grabbed my arm, not gently. Her nails pressed into my skin through the fabric. "The reading is next Friday. Morowitz and Associates, 10 a.m. She leaned in close. "Prepare yourself." "For what?" She smiled. That smile. "Just prepare yourself." She walked away. I stood there with a bruise forming on my arm. The week before the reading, I barely slept. I told myself it didn't matter. I had a job. I had a fiancé. I had a life. Whatever my father left Sandra, he'd earned the right to leave it to whoever he wanted. But I kept hearing her voice. "You're getting nothing." The certainty in it. The joy. That wasn't just confidence. That was cruelty. And something in me said she'd worked for that cruelty. She'd earned it deliberately. She'd spent 9 years engineering this moment. Friday came. Morowitz and Associates was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown. I arrived at 9:50. Sandra was already there with Diane and a man I didn't recognize. Late 50s, expensive watch. Sandra's lawyer, I assumed. She looked at me when I walked in, didn't say hello. Diane whispered something to her. They both smiled. The receptionist led us into a conference room. Dark wood table, 8 chairs, a water pitcher nobody touched. William Morowitz came in at exactly 10. He was 60-something, reading glasses on a chain, gray suit, the kind of lawyer who'd been doing this for decades and had seen everything. He set a folder on the table. He looked at each of us once. Then he began. "Before I read the document," Morowitz said, "I want to confirm the parties present." He went around the table. Sandra Holt, Diane Pruitt, Maya Holt. He looked at Sandra's lawyer. "And you are?" "Philip Crane." "I represent Mrs. Holt." Morowitz nodded slowly. He wrote something down. He opened the folder. "Richard Allen Holt, last will and testament, dated September 14th of this year." I did the math fast. September 14th. 5 weeks before my father died. 3 weeks after I'd last visited him. I remembered that visit. Sandra had let me come because he'd asked her to. Specifically asked. I remembered how thin he'd looked, how tired, but also how clearly he'd spoken. We'd talked for 2 hours while Sandra was at a charity lunch. He'd held my hand the whole time. I hadn't thought much about it then. I was thinking about it now. Morowitz cleared his throat. "I'll read the relevant provisions provisions in full. Sandra straightened in her chair. She uncrossed and recrossed her legs. She was ready. This was her moment. 9 years of work about to pay out. She glanced at Diane. Diane gave her a tiny nod. Philip Crane had his pen ready. To my wife, Sandra Marie Holt, Morowitz began. Sandra's chin lifted slightly. I leave the sum of $100,000. Silence. Sandra blinked. And the personal effects she brought into the marriage, as catalogued in Appendix C. Philip Crane's pen stopped moving. That is the full extent of the bequest to Sandra Marie Holt. The room was completely still. Then Sandra said, I'm sorry. What? Morowitz looked at her over his glasses. $100,000 and your personal effects, Mrs. Holt. She stopped. There must be an error. There is no error. He had a previous will. I have a copy of a previous will that left me. That will was revoked on September 14th. Morowitz's voice was calm, unhurried. This document supersedes all prior versions. Philip Crane leaned forward. On what grounds was it revoked? Was Mr. Holt of sound mind? We'll need to. Mr. Holt was evaluated by 2 independent physicians on the date of signing, Morowitz said. He pulled a document from the folder and set it on the table. Both certified his full cognitive capacity. The document was also witnessed by 3 parties unconnected to either beneficiary. Sandra's face had gone white. This is wrong, she said. Her voice was different now. The widow performance was gone. This is wrong, and I will fight it. That is your right, Morowitz said pleasantly. He looked back down at the document. To my daughter, Maya Elaine Holt. My stomach dropped. I leave the entirety of the Holt real estate portfolio, comprising the 3 hotel properties, all commercial holdings, and all associated equity stakes, valued at approximately $68 million at the time of this writing. I couldn't breathe. I also leave the family home at 14 Clearwater Drive and all remaining liquid assets, estimated at $2.4 million. Morowitz paused. He looked up at me. For just a moment, the professional mask slipped. He almost smiled. Additionally, I leave the following personal note to be read aloud. He reached into the folder again. A single handwritten page. He unfolded it carefully. Maya, I was a coward for too long. I let someone convince me that protecting my comfort was more important than protecting you. I know what I put you through. I know what you lost. I know you drove 4 hours to see me and were turned away from your own childhood home. I found out about that. I found out about a lot of things. These last few months, with a clearer head than I've had in years, I had people I trust look into the last 9 years carefully. What they found made me ashamed. The businesses are yours because you were always the one who understood them. You used to sit in my office at age 12 and ask me how the numbers worked. Sandra never once asked. The house is yours because your mother's roses are still in the ground under that pool deck. I never told Sandra to dig them up. She did it without asking. I love you. I always loved you. I'm sorry I let you believe otherwise. Your father, Richard. He set it on the table in front of me. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Diane said, oh my God. Sandra shoved back from the table. This is fraud, she said. Her voice cracked. He was sick. He was medicated. Someone manipulated him. Someone got to him. And Mrs. Holt. Morowitz's voice cut through cleanly. I would advise you very carefully right now. Philip Crane put a hand on her arm. She yanked it away. He loved me, she said. He told me he loved me. We had an agreement. He promised me. I gave up 9 years. 9 years of my life. Nobody spoke. Her eyes found me. And for the first time in 9 years, the power in that gaze was gone. It was just desperation. Raw, naked desperation. You did this, she said. You went to him. You poisoned him against me. You, Mrs. Holt. Morowitz stood. This meeting is concluded. Any further matters can be addressed through counsel. He closed the folder. Sandra stood in the hallway outside the conference room for a long time after. I could see her through the glass wall. Diane had her arm around her. Philip Crane was on his phone, already working out how to challenge a document that had been bulletproofed specifically to resist being challenged. I sat alone at the conference room table. The letter was still in front of me. I read it again and again. Morowitz came back in. He sat down across from me. Your father was very deliberate, he said. He came to me 3 times before signing. He asked questions most clients never think to ask, about contestability, about asset protection structures, about how to make things as clean as possible. When did he first come to you? March, when Sandra was controlling his visitor access, when I couldn't get to him without 3 days' notice. He'd been coming here in March. He'd been planning this. He never told me, I said. He didn't want to get your hopes up in case something went wrong, or in case Morowitz paused, in case he ran out of time before it was done. I sat with that. He also asked me to give you this. He slid a small envelope across the table, my name on the front, my father's handwriting. Inside was a key, a safety deposit box key, a sticker on the side, bank address, box number, and in his handwriting, underneath, the roses are there too. I went to the bank that afternoon. The box had documents, business records he wanted me to have immediately, partnership agreements, access credentials, contact information for trusted employees. But underneath all of it, in a plastic sleeve, were 3 photographs. My mother's garden, before the pool was put in, roses everywhere, pink and white and deep red. My mother kneeling in the dirt in a sun hat, laughing at whoever was holding the camera. My father, I realized. He'd taken the picture. 30 years ago, he had taken that picture, and he'd kept it here, safe, away from the house, away from her. I held the photographs for a long time. Outside, Sandra was probably on the phone with every lawyer she could find. She would file a challenge. Philip Crane would draft something aggressive. They would try every angle, and they would run into a wall, because my father had spent his final months making sure of that. I left the bank at 4 in the afternoon. I called my fiancé from the parking garage. How did it go? I didn't didn't know how to answer that. He left me everything, I finally said. A long pause. Oh my God. Yeah, are you okay? I don't know yet. I got into my car. I sat there for a moment. I thought about Sandra's face when Morowitz read the number. $100,000. After 9 years, after the roses, after the photos pulled off the walls, after every door she'd closed and every visit she'd canceled and every birthday he'd missed. $100,000 and her personal effects. I thought about my father sitting in that lawyer's office in March, still sick, still fighting, choosing to spend what energy he had left on making this right. I thought about him taking that photograph 30 years ago. I thought about him keeping it. I started the car. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you won? This isn't over. I read it once. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. I pulled out of the garage, and somewhere across town, in a glass office building on the 14th floor, William Morowitz was probably already taking Sandra's lawyer's call. He was probably already smiling,